goodness. Y'all been sitting here since the last time.
You failed to answer my question.
Yeah, I got one.
No, but then next time I'm on the radio, I'm going to ask, and I'm going to go over there and talk to Blue Deal McCurdy. And of course, now he's a big liar. And he might not. Then you believe it, you don't believe it. Alvin? Okay. Oh, no! What is it? Is that? Ava Garden.
Elizabeth Tate.
Oh, Elizabeth Tate. Josh the board. Hey. What's the coffee back there? Oh, man, good to see you.
These books are for sale. 50 cents for the paperbacks.
Camera going out.
Renee?
Books are for sale.
Okay. Okay. Where's Tony?
He's here.
That's good. Is that her? Yes. No. Yes. She talked back to me, and I took the hair off her head. Oh. Uh-oh. Boy, oh boy. I asked Joyce, when will you come in to see us? And she showed she could do money. You do it. Let me get this up there call.
Yeah, great. Did anybody find your keys?
Helen. Was that your keys laying back there?
It's about that minute ago to my mind.
You sure? All right. Look back there, see if they keys.
Unexpected busy day. Prepare today. And my son felt like he had to come over and say
The
goodbye.
purse I've got, but it was in the ladies' room. In the first
It is in Jacksonville. That's it. Somebody could pick him up by mistake.
What you do, leave your glasses? Fella, you're talking too doggone much, but it's good to see.
Can I do a one-line ad to mine?
You can. Yeah.
We need to fill the two beds in this house.
Oh. Well, hey, Don, we got Zaja Gabor up there. Yeah. Joe, she'll know you. Full name.
Oh, y'all spill coffee, huh?
You don't like, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, we had, kids somewhere. think that's what it is.
Like, what did I do?
Oh, you got the mark. There you go. You did better than I did. I tried to do a clean towel.
I tell you what, now Bob and that blanket's gonna have to go.
Yeah, she went to that already. Thank you very, very much.
I'll tell you what it is. I think you're right. But if I close them right by, so it's something like that. When I start having glasses on, I get it. Yeah, I need a problem with that, yeah. Those things are very interactive. And it won't make it. 6 minutes, this is one second. Somebody take me an old decrepit gun. None of you know where my hand is. They really pumped it out. You know where Lean Green is. Look at that. I can tell it's where it That's what it is. That's what that was interesting. Y'all will settle down and we'll get started. David?
Yes.
Would you open it with a word of prayer?
Father, we thank you for the day and your blessings in it, for each one who's gathered here, for the fellowship that we have with each other as we look into the past to understand the present and look to the future. Father, trusting in you and all that we have and all we are, we give thanks. Ask in the name of Jesus.
Amen. Would y'all stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Where did we lose Janine? Okay.
I lost one, I need it. Here. Okay, thank you. Oh, that's what I got that. Thank you.
Hey, y'all can socialize later. My goodness.
That is it. Come on. You jerk. Anybody got a pen that don't need on?
You're right.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I got a pen. You want a bag?
No, I'm just want you.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. I'm gonna let you pencil.
Okay. Good to see you, Barney.
I sent you home.
Okay. Let's go, Janine. Look.
Okay. Okay, September 17th meeting, Jerry Fisher opened the meeting, Dave Green led in prayer, the pledge was given to our flag. Jerry informed us of the date and time for our dinner for the workers of the O100. That will be on November the 8th at 6 o'clock. Janine will be contacting you about what food to bring to compliment the fresh mullet. We will decorate on Thursday. Jerry also informed us of the coming events that we will take part in. They are as follows. Some of them have already gone by, so I'm just going to say November the 2nd we'll be at Baker. We had a good fun time at Munson this past Saturday, and then November the 2nd we're going to be in Baker. Everyone is asked to attend. Now let me give you a little heads up there. we've got two guys, Jerry and Don. They come, they get, and Margaret and a couple others, Helen, they come, they get all the books, all the toys, I mean, they get everything loaded up. They get the cart thing, they got that, they head over there, they get it set up. That's a lot of work. Then we're there all day selling. Then that evening, we gotta break it all down and bring it back. That's another lot of work. And these two guys have been doing a tremendous job with it. But we need some help. We need some of you guys who possibly can, and ladies, to come and, you know, help us out here. It's hard on one or two people to try to do everything. So when we've got one of these things, we usually only have maybe 4 good ones a year, and they're spaced out fairly well. So if you can possibly come, we would love to have you. Okay. We need people to help us to sell once we get there. Okay? Jerry is a seller. There's no doubt about it. He's out there. Hey, come on over here. we all laugh at Jerry, and we're taking our cues from him. It's a great advantage for all of us to go and see what goes on and how much fun we have. And we do eat a lot, I have to admit. Margaret especially.
And Helen.
Yeah, Helen did a pretty good job too. Helen brings her own, and then we go get more. Okay, Jerry introduced our speaker, Mr. Don Ripley, who spoke on the Simpson family of Arcadia. The presentation was well done, and all enjoyed hearing about the family. With no further business, the meeting was adjourned, and refreshments were enjoyed by all. There were 26 presents. The refreshments were prepared by Jean and Agnes and others. Respectfully, Janine Johnson, Secretary. Any corrections?
Any corrections, as she said.
And we're not going to.
The Simpson was one of the main ones that got to. Yes.
Run that down again.
Renee needs to be on there. She was a big helper.
Okay, all right, I'll make sure you get on there today.
What?
All the refreshments. The
Oh.
last one, yeah. And then I'll put her down here. And now, you know, November the 8th, I'll be contacting you. So now, if you haven't already signed up, this is my way of contacting you. If you haven't already signed up to bring a dish for that night, please see me before you leave tonight. I'd like to get your name on a piece of paper and what you're going to bring. And we are planning on approximately 75 people. We don't know that we'll have that many, but we're going to plan for that many. So then if we have any leftovers, we'll, you know, we can deal with that too.
And every one of you are invited, every one of you are expected to attend. We'd love to have you.
Thank you, I'll select.
And Donald, where's Donald? Is he let? Donald must run off and hid.
They're standing outside talking. You want me to drag them in?
He's paying to
Here
train.
he comes.
Oh, you're like right.
There he is.
Donald, we want y'all to come 30 minutes after the cookout. That way, we'll have enough to go around. And we might even send Helen and Margaret with you.
5 pound of catfish is what I want myself.
Right,
Okay, Janine, obviously, we got all the corrections and everything we needed for your minutes. You did a great job.
Thank
We
you.
want to emphasize again what this cookout is.
Oh, this cookout is for our folks who put the train back together. Harold Warren, when he started this, he's sitting right there. Harold was jet black hair when he started. When he got through, Jewel had done dyed his hair white. But no, Harold did a remarkable job. As a matter of fact, I had some guy over at Munson ask me, said, well, how many times had he ever done it before? And I said, I don't think he ever even tightened a bolt on the train.
And not again.
And not again. But anyway, we're going to invite everybody we can that was part of this. And yeah, Bob, you can come too. You're limited to a half a pound of each.
Let me ask a question.
Yes.
How are you communicating with people like Bob Calloway and so forth?
We're going to try to call him. We talked about that tonight too. If you got time real quick, like I can tell you who all is there in case that we've missed somebody that you think should be invited. And if you have any question about this, then Janine, have you got your list handy, or do I need to get to mine? Here, I got mine now.
We're not going to
Here,
Baker.
I got mine.
Yeah, we going to Baker.
I thought they
If you
No, that's a no.
to Callaway, tell him he is certainly,
Yeah.
okay, good.
What'd he say?
He'll go see Don Callaway tomorrow.
Okay, now listen to this real quick, 'cause we don't want to forget a soul. This was very important. Jerry Simmons, Warren Briggs, David Preston, the policeman, Harold Warren, Johnny Potts, Bobby Warren, T.C. Jordan, Jewel Warren, Louis Zanachek, Bob McGowan, Bob Calloway, Tom Dragon, Don Sales, Margaret Collier, Neil Collier, Russell Fountain, Ken Koloff, Greg Evers, Jeff Miller, Stephen Berry, and the City of Century employees.
And the mayor.
Yeah, and the mayor. Does anybody, did I miss anybody? And y'all. And y'all, every one of them, we want y'all here.
Well, if they know anybody from the past that has anything to do with donations to the train, they can give you the name.
Yeah. Now, we can't guarantee that any of these people are gonna come, but we're gonna have the party come what may. We're gonna serve mud.
With or without?
That's right. We're gonna serve mud.
And
Okay.
all the fixings.
And all the things.
And we're gonna have to do it.
Yeah. It'll be on a Friday night.
So don't cook supper at
Yeah,
home.
don't
Come
cook
home.
supper.
Run the
All right.
time by again.
Sure.
The time, one more time.
6
6
o'clock.
o'clock.
6 o'clock.
That's when we
That's
start
when we
to
start.
All right,
serve.
now let me
We're gonna
explain.
have to serve at 6. You'll be here a little early.
Let me explain to you the way that we're gonna try to do this. We're gonna try to get that boy of mine that's got a cooker to come fry fish. We're gonna have the sides, and as he takes them up, you'll stop by, pick you up whatever you want while it's good and hot, and you come and get the sides that you want, sit down and eat, scold your wife or whatever you want to do, and go back and get some more if you want.
After that's the end of the line, after everybody else got there first.
That's right.
Hey,
And if you get out of line, Jewel is a bouncer. Okay. Any questions about the cookout? We have a good time regardless of what we do. We're going to have a good time at this. And we only have a good time because we always diddle-daddling with the people. That was the same way. Now, Janine talked about us having the work at Munson. It was work. It was hard. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was.
And I enjoyed talking to people.
Yes, he was.
And I-
You making any money?
oh, yeah, we brought home $753 at that one. At Flumerton, we brought home $726 approximately. Now, part of this money, I went in yesterday and bought toys. So we got plenty of
Toys,
toys.
so good.
If you want to do your Christmas shopping, come on up here.
What time do y'all usually load stuff up to carry out? I mean, do you do it the morning that you go, or do you do it in the
No,
afternoon,
no.
or?
Like on,
Like,
when we go to Baker, Donald and I will be up here probably about 4 o'clock. Donald, where you at?
Yeah, that's right.
About 4 o'clock in the evening, load up, we put the tables, the tents, the toys, the
You
books,
would be here.
and then we take it over there and set it up, so in the morning we'll be fresh. Then the next morning, we get over there about 8 o'clock, we jump out, we go to, Donald goes to line and I go to preaching.
Y'all know that's just backwards.
I know that.
Okay. You line about one more time and on the other side that head's gonna hurt.
I'll be sitting with you.
Real quick, like, before we get into our guest speaker, unless anybody had anything else they wanted to discuss. And I want y'all, that's right, I hadn't forgot you, Don.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, we'll time out. Don, you got the floor.
I asked Jerry, I need a 1 minute advertisement here. We got 2 beds at the nursing home that are vacant, and we need to fill them.
Yeah, right.
I thought we might entice somebody like Jerry, he's gonna.
If Margaret keeps talking back, she's gonna be out there.
No, but we're having a seminar at the nursing home on Thursday, at 2 o'clock, this Thursday. If I had email addresses of everybody here, I could have sent out the notice. It should have been in the paper and on the radio and what have you, but it's traveling the healthcare continuum. I don't know who makes these things up, but most of us don't need it because we're not quite old enough, but I'm sure you've got some elderly parents that might be ready for it. No, the main thing is about planning for long-term care or your later years where it doesn't just devastate your finances and you lose everything in your house and everything else if you ever have to go into a nursing home. Our guest speaker is going to be Jason Waddell. He's an elder care attorney in Pensacola. He's very good and has represented a lot of our clients or residents at the nursing home. If you've got if you have over $2,000, you know, you don't qualify for Medicaid. But most people, if they went into a nursing home and they save $50,000 to $100,000 or something like that, it can be gone in less than 2 years. So he's got some very good ideas, things that we're using right now, like Medicaid income trust, personal services agreements, different things that you can actually lease out some property to a neighbor to do some farming, to have an income property, which would not disqualify you, but you'd have to use that portion of the income to your resident responsibility. So there's a lot of things you can do. It's at 2 o'clock. We're going to be talking about home health care, the rural health initiative. Dr. Smith is going to be there representing the terrace over in Jay, and I'm going to say a few words. And they're only 10-minute little spiel, so Jason Waddell is going to talk for about 30 minutes and have a PowerPoint presentation. But we're going to have refreshments and I'd like you to come. Thank you, Lord.
And when is this now?
Ma'am?
When?
It's Thursday, this Thursday at 2 o'clock at the nursing home.
Don, if we run up on any elderly people, we'll certainly tell them.
I knew I would.
Okay, go back to where I was at. When we were over at Munson the other day, Nathan Cheshire wrote a book. And I'm blessed I got to buy the very first copy. And it's on the Creek Indians. And so he had 2 more left, and I bought them for us over here. If you want one, there's only 2, so they're $25 a piece. And so they'll be in here if you want them. You see us pay $25, it'll go to the society and pick you up a book. Okay, enough about that.
Jerry, I bought one for the nursing home. You know, we have some of the.
Okie dokie, I'll be $49.95, please. Inflation.
And he's telling the truth.
Okay, I got one more. Did anybody else want the other one?
The other one,
Okay, Bob. Here we go.
39.
Weston, pass that back there and do not charge him the carrying charge.
Jerry, you want some shame.
Boy, oh boy.
The best part is at the back. There's pictures of some of the things that he has made
Yeah.
with Creek design.
Okay, and that goes right back to this next gentleman that we have here. Y'all all know where Bratt is at. And so Russell has wrote a book on the community of Bratt. Russell, stand up for me one time so they'll know who I keep talking about.
It's me.
Just because you got a haircut like mine, you got to be seen.
With the hole in the top?
Yeah, yeah. But Russell wrote this book right here, and he's going to tell you a little bit about it. He's our guest speaker tonight. It's got some nice pictures to it. And So if you decide you want one of them after you listen to Russell tell us about it, and Russell, I think you're a lifelong resident of this area, aren't you?
Yes, yes, in Cantonment, and I was raised in Bogie.
In Bogie, okay. That makes you kin to Carrie Ennis, isn't that?
Everybody know it is.
Okay, Russell, I'm gonna turn this thing over to you. Now stand up and just tell these people all about it. His book is also $45. So when he gets through, if you want one, you stop by and see Russell. He'll autograph it for you and send you on your way. Russell, you got the floor. Go to it.
Let me get sorted out a little bit.
You want to look at it? I have it going.
I'd like to thank the association for inviting me to come speak without any prior knowledge of whether I can or not. It's been a long time since I did any public addressing of any kind. A little background on myself. I've lived around Cantonment since I was in 9th grade. And before that, I was raised in Bogie, on the more rural side of the west, near Mr. Ward.
That's now known as West Bogie Heights.
And most of my relatives lived in Bratt. And so I was associated with going to Bratt, seeing my grandparents, and going to church. I went to several of the churches there as a child. So I had a little bit of knowledge about Bratt growing up, although I didn't know a lot of people there. When I got retired, I had time to get interested in some of the family, and I started pursuing, and I'm sorry I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, I'm not prepared for that either, but I was interested in looking at my great-grandfather, and move that up there, maybe I can use this. And he came to Bratt in 1920. He was the last of my great-grandparents who came there. They were all from Bratt. John Brown, John and Fanny Brown. Now,
I'll be John Brown.
Sorry. So as a result of writing that little book for my family, I got interested in Bratt and found out a lot of things about it. And so I decided to take that little bit of knowledge and go back and investigate a little bit more. Because it's a bit of a unique community as far as I'm concerned, that you would think that there's nothing there. It's just a small crossroads area. So I went in and started doing a little bit more research, and I ended up with this book. And the book is a little over 150 pages. It's not only about Bratt, it's about the history of the northwestern part of the county and how it's associated with the farming. And it primarily goes through from 1900 through 1950, and incorporates some of the things that's of interest to everybody, like the building of the highways in the 1930s. You may not know it, but most of the great improvements that ever happened in the north part of Escambia County as far as the infrastructure was done by the WBA in the 1930s. If it hadn't been for the Great Depression, we would still be driving around on a lot of dirt roads. So it has some of this other stuff in it. And I have this one that I've signed, and I wanted to donate it to the library of the association. Mr. Fisher.
We appreciate that.
So, let me talk about Bratt and the community a little bit. This, what I've got to say, will probably take up the first 30 pages of 150 pages, so you can come back and forth. Where is Bratt? In case no one actually knows. Bratt is a small farming community near the northern border of the most northwestern county in the state of Florida. It was settled around 1900 as a result of the transition at that time from the great logging boom in Florida to the farming that came on into this area. This is Bratt here. In 1900, Bratt was being settled in the midst of many communities that had been long established in the county. These communities came here in the early part of the 1800s for the most part. Some of them still survive today. There's a lot of talk by what we would call our official historians about the settlement of this area. I know go back to the Spanish and tell you all about it's all due to the Spanish coming and settling in the 1500s. But if you look at the north end of the county, this area had nothing to do with the Spanish settlements. The Spanish hardly ever came past the community Gonzales. There was a mission there and several plantations in them. But for the most part, they didn't care anything about coming into the inside part of the country. Most of the settlement of this part of the area goes back to 1800s and the development of the Federal Road. This is a portion of a map of 1818 that I found at the Alabama Archives. And it shows the original counties in southern Alabama and the Federal Road. The road was intended to go from New Orleans, Louisiana to Athens, Georgia. By 1800, it had been completed to Fort Mims on the Alabama River. Immediately upon its completion, settlers started coming in and settling on the areas along the road in the Mississippi territories. Unfortunately, this wasn't the U.S. property. This belonged to the Creek Nations. The Creek Nations, you might know, belonged to several loosely associated Indian tribes to the whole southeast. They didn't like us coming. So it started the War of 1813, Creek Indian Wars. The wars were resolved by Andrew Jackson in 1813 at Horseshoe Bend, just north of Brooklyn, Alabama. At that battle, he destroyed the defenses of the Creek Indians, and they fled into Spanish Florida to Pensacola. Pensacola was nothing more than a trading post at that time, but it dealt with the Indians more than anyone else in them. Well, at this point in history, the British forces during the War of 1812 had already burned down Washington. And Andrew Jackson needed little excuse to invade and attack the British forces, even though this was Spanish West Florida. The British garrison held the town. So along with 2,000 soldiers from Mobile, he forced himself into North Florida and attacked Pensacola, and the British took off. They wanted nothing to do with that many people. So they left the Spanish holding the bag, having to deal with Jackson. Shortly thereafter, we have land grants that were given to some of the earliest Americans in this part of the country. By 1820, Florida became part of the U.S. territories, and more Americans came in. And population again began to grow. And by the 1830s and 1840s, we were on the beginnings of the great lumber boom, the logging boom of the pines, longleaf pines in the South. In the 1860s, all of that production area that was here along the coast was destroyed by the Confederates as they left Pensacola and withdrew to the Alabama state line. And by the 1870s, there was a reemergence of the longleaf pine harvesting. By the end of the 1890s, almost all the harvesting had depleted in this area, and we're beginning to reach a transition into the farming lands. Most of the large landowners at that time that had nothing but logging in mind had cut all the trees out, and they had no use for the land. So the land was at a bargain. So Bratt came in at this time, settling in an area where it was surrounded by very prosperous communities. Just to tell you just a little bit about what was here in 1900. On the Alabama state line, straddling both sides, was the community of Nokomis. Nokomis was one of the first railroad logging communities that actually had a railroad spur that came off the Alabama Railroad. By the 1890s, it had already depleted all its forest and had already turned into one of the first agriculture areas in the county. East of that was the town of Atmore. Atmore was settled by William Williams of Walnut Hill in order to supply his large holdings down here at the beginning of the Civil War. And by 1900, it had 2 large sawmills and was already an agricultural transport center. Canoe Station was settled first in 1854 as the beginnings of the first Alabama Railroad came across. By the Civil War in 1865 was where the Union commander made all his reports back on the progress of the Union forces as it came from Pensacola to Mobile as the last battle of the war. So it was a well-established town by then. By 1900, it was a thriving town, but the competition between it and Atmore, it began to fall off in the late 1920s and early 30s. Immediately to the west of Bratt was the community of Warville. Warville was established in the 1840s. It had a large pond at the headwaters of Pine Barren Creek, where it had a sawmill and a large grist mill. This was one of the first logging communities that fed logs down to Pine Barren Creek. South of Bratt was the community of Wiggins. Today is Oak Grove. Its name was changed in 1916 when the second school was built here, and the community took the name of the school. In 1900, Wiggins was a very prosperous logging center, supplying the McMillan Mill at Pine Barren. There were 3 sawmills, a shingle mill, a cotton gin, and at least 2 stores in this community in 1900. Southwest of Wiggins was the community of Walnut Hill. In 1900, they had for a short period of time a railroad depot on the Western Railroad, but this failed. Before 1900, this was the most well-known area of William L. Williams, the founder of Atmore. To mention Mr. Williams,
The Williams Station, festival that they used to have.
yes ma'am. This is William L. Williams, one of the first landholders of Walnut Hill. He looks at me. Mr. Williams founded Williams Station at the beginning of the Civil War. He was a Florida State Representative in 1858 and 1859 at the beginning of the war, but withdrew when the war started. He was replaced by Mr. Byrne. Byrne. Mr. Byrne was another well-known logging magnate north in the county.
Is it B-Y-R-N-E, Byrne?
Yes. Mr. Williams was known to be a Confederate spy during the Civil War. He had Confederate contingents living in his yard at his home near today's community center on Highway 97. And it's said that there's a Confederate cemetery under the adjacent field. In 1872, Escambia County's tax records show that Mr. Williams owned over 2,000 acres in Walnut Hill. In 1877, he was again elected to the Florida State Representatives. And by 1890, he had moved from Walnut Hill and had moved to the town of McDavid, where this is believed to be in 1898, sorry. This is believed to be taken his 88th birthday with a large celebration that was held by the McDavid family. In 1900, he's shown on the U.S. Census as the landlord. So that's just someone interested to the history. The people that came into Bratt this time today, Walnut Hill, by the way, is probably the largest of the farm areas in northern Escambia County. It's generally encompassed, everything is called Walnut Hill in that part of the county. In 1900, as the people came into Bratt, they came into an area where there was only a few major roads. You might stand way too far.
No, you're okay.
This is a map from about 1916 which shows the Bratt's roads. The black roads are what was considered as major county roads, and the dotted lines were secondary roads to them. Although there were other roads here, in 1900 there were logging roads that made a spider web of this area. You could go anywhere from anywhere just by going through the logging areas.
So you didn't get lost.
That's right. You just look for the sign and go the other way. There were two major roads. The first road, today is Highway 99, came through today's center of Bratt. There's an X here. This is today's Bratt Crossroads where the little store is at. Highway 99 began in Atmore and meandered and made a zigzag down to the state line where it went east and then turned directly north of the community and went straight down through the middle of the community. It went on down to Oak Grove and then towards Walnut Hill, where it tied into today's Highway 97 to go to Molino. The other major road up here was Pine Barren Road. Pine Barren Road began at Wardville. It meandered to the east where at today's Assembly of God it merged into what is today's Highway 4 and went west across the Bratt Crossroads to it got to today's First Baptist Church. There it broke off and began a southeasterly meandering trek to Pine Barren where the McMillan Mill was at. So a juncture of another road was here at that time. This road came to Bluff Springs and to Century. It was called both Bluff Springs Road and the Century Road right after the turn of the century. In 1910, one of the many roads that was straightened out in this area was Old Bratt Road, today's Old Bratt Road, which is this road. You can see that there's a red and black line here where the road was straightened and went around the new property lines as the new farmers came in and bought property. You might ask, how do we know if these are old roads or new roads? If you consider that the large landowners who were cutting trees had no concern about roads. They just needed access to get the logs out of their properties. They didn't care if it went through the middle of the property or the side of the property. But when the farmers came in and began to buy property, usually a farm was 40 acres and a large farm was 80 acres. They didn't want a road going through the middle of their property. That cut some of their land down. So they began to make deals with the county to redirect the roads. So you can tell if you reach the conclusion of how the properties in the state of Florida laid out in the grids of townships and sections. A 40-acre square is what a farmer would buy, and a farmer would want that road to go around his road, his property. So you see the straight lines across the new farm areas as opposed to the jaggedy lines across the old roads. There were other roads here that, although they weren't considered major roads, about a half mile south of the merging of new 1910 Pine Barren Road was a road today called Hanks Road. This was a heavily populated road in 1900 as new farmers were coming in. And in 1906, the community's first school, the Gilly School, was built at the east end of this road. A mile and a half to the south was another road, today called Breastworks Road. At the juncture of this road is one of the many lost logging communities that have faded away over time. The only evidence of this community is the existence in the records of the Mitchell Creek Baptist Church, which is only said to be at the headwaters of Mitchell Creek, which is just east of the intersection. This area was already populated before 1900. The Hollands and the Lees and the Dawkins lived here in the late 1880s. This road originally ended at Breastworks Creek where the Dawkins family owned it. They were a well-known logging operation and they were known to own at least a square mile south of here where they logged along Breastworks Creek and Pine Barren Creek. There were many families here before 1900, although it was not very consolidated. The U.S. Census in 1900 of Ward's Mill, which at that time measured farm families, and 22 log cutting families. So there weren't very many families here, although they were everywhere. It was not barren. Some of the families that were here before 1900, or came here in 1900, was the O'Farrell family, the Jim O'Farrell family. They settled. This is Pine Barren Creek, which is the southern borders of Bratt. Jim O'Farrell was a cattleman. He had his farm down here. By 1910, he had built a sawmill near his farm, which lasted until almost World War II. Further north of him was Walter Hall, another cattleman. And the cattlemen at this time ran their cattle through the pine forest.
Sound like you're naming the roads that I know are all up and down there.
That's right. All of them. If you go to Bratt, the roads are named after families, and almost every time that family came here in 1900 or before, just a little bit before. Near the crossroads was a William Godwin farm, just west of the crossroads. William Godwin was known to already start selling land here before 1880. So the Godwins were well established. And another well-known property owner here was Robert Kendrick. You might be more familiar with the history of Robert Kendrick, is noted as one of the early Bluff Springs pioneers. Although at that time, if you consider that Bluff Springs was the only town in the north part of the county, everything was associated with Bluff Springs all the way over, most of the way across the top of the county. So if anybody said they were from Bluff Springs, that was it.
That's why the RLDS campground considers itself Bluff Springs.
Robert Kendrick was a well-known sheep man. He had made his fortune off of wool. There are several stories about him and how much money he had, and he didn't need any more. One of the stories is that when they came in with the naval stores operations across his land and tried to lease land from him in order to come on, he told them, just come on across and do your operations and don't pay me, I don't need it. He just didn't want to bother with money anymore because he had all he wanted.
Yeah, we're that way.
A lot of people have it. There were businesses here already in 1894. The Rigby family had come in and bought property here along Beaver Creek Dam, Beaver Creek, and had built the Rigby grist mill. It was in operation by 1897. And in 1900, Mr. Pickering was known as a community blacksmith. So there were people living here already. An interesting feature that's still in Bratt today that you might want to go look at sometime is the community cemetery. The community cemetery was, and still is, just on the edge of what was William Godwin's farm. The cemetery here dates to 1877 that we know of. That's the earliest concrete headstones. One of the most well-known early people that's buried here. I'm sorry about the size of these things. I didn't realize that some of them were so small. Celestine Ward, considered the founder of Wardville, is buried here. He died there in 1891. Mr. Ward is one of 3 Civil War soldiers that are marked at the cemetery.
Which cemetery are we talking about here?
This is Godwin Cemetery, the community cemetery. It's just west of the Bratt Crossroads.
We put one in there today.
It is a growing place. The cemetery, this is a photo from 1932. It's a bit distorted.
I didn't realize that had been there that long, that structure.
This is the original building. In 1931, Peter Amerson passed away. His wife told his children that he had always had great fear of thunderstorms and wanted them to put a shelter over it. That's the family story. So they built a shelter over it. In 1932, a year later, she died. And they built a second shelter next to it. And you might be able to see there's 2 roofs here. That's the original roofs on this building. The building has been worked on for many years and now has 1 roof on it. This is not the first of these shelters here. This was a common practice at this cemetery in this era. The first known grave is that of Celestine Ward in 1891. This type of structure, a white picket fence with a pitched roof, is said to be a descendant of the Creek burial houses. It evolved from the tradition of burying their dead under the bed in the house. And later, they built their own houses and buried them. And people of Creek descent often took this up, and then the other people in the community took it up. You'll notice there's another one here at this time already, and you can see in the distance in the cemetery. You can also see this large building to the side. This is the funeral building. Another unique feature of the cemetery at that time. Bratt Cemetery is not associated with any of the churches in the community. It's an independent cemetery. It was here long before any of the churches established. So it doesn't have any conflict with the churches, and the churches have all brought their people there. This building often didn't even bother with the churches. In the early years, when it was a tradition that you had your wake in your home, and the deceased stayed in the den, or the living room, or the dining room. In the case of my great-grandfather, he laid on the high board in the dining room 3 days before they got a coffin for him. He died at the height of the Depression, when it was a thing you would go to the Mac Davis store and buy a coffin, and go back home and put your deceased in the coffin, take it to the cemetery. This building had a driveway through it for the wagons, in one side and out the other side, a small little trail.
Drive-through.
Drive-through. It faced 12 or so pews that were mounted on posts in the ground. And the building stayed here until the 1960s, when it was heavily damaged by storms. By this time, going to the church was a normal thing that people did for funerals, and it was little used, so people decided to tear it down. Today you'll see the flagpole near the center of this old building. Should make this building. I can tell you a little more.
Okay.
I can tell you a little more. New families came into Bratt at the turn of the century. One of the families that a lot of the migration revolved around was the Rowley family. This is 7 brothers and sisters that had come to this family that were all old, mature people when they got here. Most of them had grown children at the time. Like almost all of the early settlers in Bratt, they came from Monroe County, Alabama. Why everybody came here from Monroe County at that time, we don't really know. It hasn't been addressed. But many of them did. Some came from Clark County, most from Monroe County. One of the members of the Rowley family that came here at that time was Oliver Wiggins. This is the Oliver Wiggins family 5 years after they came, and you can see all the grown people here. That's his children. This is normal for this type of family that you would see coming into this area, except the pictures were distorted. This size of family would have come here at this time, a large farm family, with children and grandchildren all being under the heading of the granddad. You can see here the whole of the dog run house, their large dog run house. A lot of the family lived in this house, the whole family. There was only a few of them that didn't stay here. Mr. Wiggins lived north of Bratt's Crossroads, where some of his descendants are still.
Would that have been Clydell's
Mm-hmm.
people?
Kinfolk.
The Wiggins family dates back in South Alabama to 1813.
One of our members is from that.
Family.
Leroy, you remember he was a guest speaker here too.
Another one of the members of the Rowley family that came was Lindsay Hanks. Lindsay Hanks is considered the father of Bratt. He came with 2 brothers. There were 3 of 10 children in his family. They also came from Monroe County. They were very educated. Their father was a teacher. So they had to step up for most of the people that came here. The 3 brothers were also mature when they came here. Among the 3 of them, they had over 30 children. You can see that population boom like that would stress what little bit of school there was here. There's a whole section on the history of the schools of Bratt, Oak Grove, Walnut Hill, and how they associated with one another in my book. There were three brothers, Lindsay Hanks, Calvin Hanks, and Joseph Hanks. Calvin Hanks was the middle brother. He was the first one seen in Florida. He lived in Walnut Hill in 1899 and then moved to Bratt to join his brothers right after the turn of the century. Lindsay Hanks came here in about 1903 and began buying property. In 1904, he built a store at the crossroads of Bratt. The same year, he and his brother put an application in for a post office. It said that they put in three names. The three names were former property owners of the land that he had bought at the crossroads. The land picked, the name of the property owner that was picked was Bratt. Bratt is probably from Henry B. Bratt, and there's little known about Henry B. Bratt. He apparently was a land speculator that only came here to buy property and turn around and sell it. He's not shown in any tax records in Escambia County at that time. He had no other lands, and only on one deed it shows Henry Bratt of Canoe, although there is no Henry Bratt of Canoe on the census of 1900. We don't know where he was or where he went.
But he came and he went.
So the community is named after somebody anonymous. The post office opened in 1904, and Joseph Hanks took the position of postmaster. He was the first government official to ever have the name Bratt associated with his name. He held the title for 2 years. In 1906, it was announced that Atmore would start one of the largest rural delivery systems in the South. And in 1907, the Bratt post office closed. So we believe it was associated with that, since there's no actual documentation that says why. It's believed it was because Atmore took the operation over and they didn't need it, along with one other small post office near Bratt at the same time, open and closed at the same time.
What was its name?
I can't tell you right now.
I'll wait a minute.
Joseph Hanks turned down the position of postmaster for that year to take the title of Justice of the Peace. So not only was he the first government official, U.S. government official to hold the title in Bratt, he was the first county official to hold the title in Bratt. That was also a short title, although he kept the title of registrar until he got very old. And some of the elders of Bratt today don't care for his name because of some of the errors he made when he was old on birth certificates. When they went to get their Social Security, they discovered that they had their mother's name as their name on their birth certificates instead of their father's. It's very difficult to correct when you get Social Security. In 1905, the population was growing, and the records show that the Wardville School had 106 students at it. In 1905, families began to really start arriving in Bratt. The Hilliard-Blanton family arrived here. Another family that had several different children that arrived, that were grown and arrived also at the same time. The Blantons are another group that came in from Monroe County. Their family dates back to 1800 in that area also. Frank Nowlin came here in 1905. He was 45 years old when he came here. He brought his wife, had several children. She passed away. He got married, had several more children. He had children until he was in his 70s.
Was that the Frank Nowlin from Santa Rosa County?
No, he was from Alabama also. He was a direct descendant of William Weatherford. If you know your Creek history, he was a great Red Stick warrior during the 1813 wars. William Robertson came here at this time. He was from Chicago. He was one of the businessmen that moved here. By 1905, he had a cotton gin and a sawmill on his property east of today's crossroads. If you look at a map at that time, today's crossroads are here where the X is at. But this area was growing also. Directly south, these dotted lines go to Canoe Station. This was the direct link from Canoe Station to Pine Barren Road, which went south. So it was believed that this area was growing also. So this is where he bought his property. And also at this time there was a naval stores operation here. John McNeely was the owner of the naval stores operation. He was from Central Florida. He had had an experience as a turpentine operator for 20 years when he came here. And by 1920 he had retired from it. In Bratt, there are a few houses that are recognizable today as some of the old houses that were there at the turn of the century. One of the more unique houses has a history that is of interest to the people of Bratt. It's still there today if you happen to go down Highway 4 just before you get to the high school going west. If you look out to the south across the fields, when they've cut the fields, you'll see a two-story building standing there. That's the Hainsworth house. The Hainsworth house was built in 1908. Built by John Hainsworth. He came here from Chicago, Illinois. He was the son of a farmer who had achieved great success in Chicago in the ice business. In 1907, he married his second wife. And the story goes that was his second wife was a divorcee who had just gone to Chicago from Georgia. Part of the settlement that she had with her first husband was 160 acres in northwest Florida. So before he decided he would accept her dowry and marry her, he took a train and came to northwest Florida. Mr. Robertson saw that there was a cotton gin sitting across the road from this property and a great potential to grow. So he built a house and moved down here with his new wife and his son from his first marriage. This was a boarding house. Typical of the early style of boarding houses, you might see the porch that sticks out. Along this porch out the back of it was 4 rooms. One of the rooms was to take care of the kitchen, the other room was to take care of the storeroom, and 2 of the rooms were travelers' bedrooms, as they were called. The purpose of the traveler's bedroom or the boarding house was for you not to be bothered by anybody that wanted a room to stay in late at night. If they knew there was a boarding house here, they would come to that back porch and they would find them an empty room, spend the night, and leave their money under the wash basin on the porch the next day. The inside of the house had a central area with a large dining table, and the rest of the house was all bedrooms. The center part of the house, except a small parlor in the very front. He built his house, and shortly after he built it, he discovered this is not the area that Bratt was growing in. And he almost became destitute. He said that the only reason he didn't go back to Chicago was he didn't have enough money to get a ticket on the train. The only thing that saved him and his family from this is his son had gone off to World War I, and when he came back, they decided that there was an opportunity here with the schools. Wardville was growing rapidly still. And in 1926, they built a new school that replaced the Wardville School, the first school in Bratt, the Wardville Bratt School. The teachers needed a place to stay, so they went and got the teachers, and they said, you can stay with us. So the Hainsworth house became the place that the teachers stayed. They stayed here for over 25 years. The Hainsworth house became a regular staying place. One of their residents, you might recall, was Mr. Woodham, who became county superintendent, or most long-standing county school superintendent.
Let me ask you one question. Is the house still maintained?
It is.
It is, okay.
It is.
Is it lived in?
It is.
Yeah, looks better now than it did back then.
I recently went over and visited. And the front of the house, there's been a large addition built on the back of the house. And, some of the Blanton family owns it now.
That's not the house on, it's not on Ashcraft, is it?
It's on Old Bratt Road.
Just east of Iberia.
There's two houses on Ashcraft Road, the old John Ashcraft home and the old Walter Emerson home. If that's the ones you're thinking of.
I just remember there was a two-story on Ashcraft.
That it's no longer there, not the original house.
I mean, the one I just saw a few weeks ago.
It was an exciting area.
It was.
With the O'Farrells and the other guy with the cattle people.
It was.
It was a horse.
It was a very exciting area. The cattle, running the cattle in the woods in Florida ended in the 1940s and in Alabama. When the states came out and adopted policies that the cattle had to be treated with ticks, apparently there was a huge problem with infecting the cattle so badly that it was killing the cows, or rather making them very sick. So the states came out with this edict that you had to run your cattle through the dip stations. And in Alabama, it was such an issue that a couple of the farmers were killed in some of the dip stations because they protested.
Maybe going there because one of them accused the other of stealing. And it didn't work out, but big trial going on. I have it on records.
Yeah.
There was a place at Bluff Springs, at Ray's Chapel Baptist Church, which they maintained was cattle dip. And if they weren't dipping cattle, they couldn't advertise in it.
Yeah, I guess I would stop.
Yeah, I imagine it's pretty close to that time. Yeah.
There's so much.
Yeah.
We need a series.
Like I said, this covers about the first 20 pages or so.
Well, then, we're gonna give you one of ours. I'm gonna pay you for one of your books, because Elena, she's gotta get home.
Okay.
And so, autograph this thing for me, and, we got refreshments in here. They're ready to go. And if y'all want one of these books, he's got them up here at $25.
If you don't know that you want one now, I got a flyer here with my address. If you want to send me something later.
Pass it this way,
I'm gonna let you have 25, almost 35 back. He's a Hudson. Yeah, I got it. Get mom. I tell you what, dude. Take this money and give it to mom. Good. Yeah, Mark. No, that's good. Elena. Janine, did Agnes leave? Okay. Barney, are you going to help with Okay, well, it's going to be November the 8th, on Friday. What?
watch her.
You better watch him.
Take care of my girl.
I'm gonna take her home and wear her out.
She's tired.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm gonna make her go home and clean house.
Oh.
I doubt it.
Can you finish your play?
But no,
Hey, Don.
He has to get up to extra day if he has to do it.
I know there's so much you can do on the other side. But they still do it in places.
But you have no research. I didn't know that I knew somebody was.
That's good. He was the first known official to ever come to Bratt. He was the first governor ever used an automobile and a loudspeaker.
They're
I should. You probably remember his first sister. Right. I had, the gentleman from the nursing home walking off and. Oh, yeah. Yes, I was out of school, but that you came along, I guess, yeah.
I remember your dad driving to school.
Oh, yeah.
So how are you doing, Sally?
I talked to Mrs.
Where are you? Do you teach at Pensacola or where? In Pensacola?
Over at Bratt and interviewed her and she was.
Yeah. Oh, I hear.
Yeah.
Precious old free will back. I'm gonna visit some more of these folks.
I'll be finished pretty quickly.
I hate the people.
Well, I was with the clerk's office, well, he was prior to that, and so I'm staying in the Florida retirement system.
I will. I'll be here next month.
That was, got a position, and this is my sixth day.
I've been in that, so I think it's that.
Yeah, wouldn't we all? It's got an addition on the back here.
I knew they, especially the lady Hainsworth, a young
You know, I drive by the, oh yeah, it's even down there.
I never know that.
Uh-huh.
and his was started to see.
He was Francis.
It comes and goes, the bushes.
There you are. Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to look, just want to change.
I went out there.
I need to give some change and say gave you.
I'm surprised nobody's gone in it or tried to market it.
The plant manager, we got a good carry one.
Yep. Sign it for Super Care Center.
Okay.
To go to Jay.
Okay.
John's still left no money for his wife and family. Carol goes to the wife.
Screen, did I give everybody a book that came up, gave me money?
Plan getting married and family. Although he paid for funeral, she used to play some marker.
Got a mind
John's
on
still
Yeah,
great,
my son
still on marker.
a few weeks ago, he said, "Oh, you've got to do that." I said, "Derek, I can't even maintain my own, much less do that too."
Yeah, they, Jerry's been asking about coming up here, and I happened to be up here, and I was going back sooner, and Joyce said, wait till Wednesday, go back to having a meeting for Tuesday night, and go.
Maybe we'll run into it.
The hanging of Bob Blackwell. Bob Blackwell.
That is the,
Okay.
that's the Bratt.
Yeah, they're good now.
Every bit of it's good.
Presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, that was in our backyard. No, it was interesting to see the house, because my mother had to stay there. She was teaching.
Yes.
She was sitting right where
Let's live.
she was sitting. And when she first started teaching, she would ride with a man that was married. And the district, the school district wouldn't allow that. So he would take her to that house, on Monday. She stayed with them all week. Yeah.
Certainly is. I wasn't aware that that was a rule.
And what's funny is, it still is, there's so many rules that, about skirt lengths, all kind of crazy things that have never been
Antiquated.
changed. Yeah.
Did you know there were 11 bars between Century and Pioneer?
You know, I knew that it was, at one time there was 4 just in Bluff Springs.
Yeah.
But
They were three in back day.
Feel it,
Are you
rubber
gonna
black.
spill anything? You
I
said
don't
you-
know, I'm gonna get
I
there.
couldn't say one here about whiskey. I was trying to concentrate on Bratt. Back then, it was, everybody was in drink.
I had, yeah, I heard that about Buzz Flynn years ago. I brought my mother up to visit. And, we sat.
Well, go ahead.
Come on. And the old man, he had an old Dutchman out for, he was, my mother, he talked about how the old lady had that store there, and she was selling food on Sunday, and they got caught, got in all kind of trouble, and on and on and on. I guess I don't think the Jimmy Lee was selling food, was it? I don't know. He got so funny, he said, "All food on Sunday."
Yeah, it used to not be legal here on Sunday.
No, it does.
This was a rough area.
Yes, yes, it was.
Well, you have something else to type
Russell, and one of those pictures in the book, it's got Hamp Brown and Russell Black. You know, Hamp Brown was probably Shirley Bedlois and all them daddy.
Yes.
Well, now Russell, was that Russell Black's daddy?
I don't know. I hadn't researched into the other people in that photograph. I knew about Mr. Ham.
Yeah,
Uh,
I was just wondering.
Yeah, you would be any kin to the Browns, would you? The Bogie Browns. Yeah, that's where you
Well, my daddy's Paul.
Somewhat.
We moved away. Your mother,
Davis,
your family came and saw my family when we were very small.
Mom and Dad already visiting everybody.
Yeah.
Sure, Brown Black.
You get lost.
When did you finally get through this?
You know, which one? That's,
We picked it up from the printer.
I went to check the wheels on.
I know, there is food that can
Pretty
be.
important. Very
So much you way back to the child line?
I want to make sure you know.
People that.
Mine's usually outside. I'd like to have sheriff.
Oh, yeah.
That's good, because they're already always interested.
Without a Walmart, you gotta send a sheriff. Works out inside. You go to the small issue, you have basically some sheriff's bike shooting. The reviews, you want $49 fee for it. I'm not, I go to this.
What reminded me of that was the drive.
Remember, you didn't get you a
All the stuff on TV, I just don't buy into it.
Maybe I'll just tell you if you stay or not, it's up to you.
You still looking at that, Mr.
I am.
Girl, where's your other half at tonight?
He's working,
Oh, boy.
yeah,
I guess somebody.
he's on evening shift.
Where does it work?
Petrol operating,
Oh.
like that freaking January.
Set up was a smart air boost for the homeowners.
I'll never get finished.
You lead like a Baptist with your hands. My cousin, who's a Methodist, one time, she said, "Do you know the difference between Baptist and Methodist?" Well, yeah, my theologian. No, not that. He said a Methodist is civilized.
You might not want to hear my definition. Methodist is big trees and liquor store. No, you don't know.
Oh, you did?
I better keep my eye.
Oh, yeah. I have no idea what she was eating. It's gone.
Billy, you remember that talk about 3 months ago that Neil done for us? His sweet bakers and lava bears and all the bears.
Work. Son has to take your dog for a ride. Been over to your son's house, take your dog for a ride.
No, he rides. He rides on the top of the dog. Where he goes, running out.
Yeah, I didn't know. I was sick of it.
There was.
Gotta get another.
Cool morning, I'm gonna try to get him.
Did you make cookies? Listen, you want to sell your candy? Miss Rose is stuck on my name.
Hey, fur and hey, wool.
Who's that dude?
Shield. Right, babe.
So what?
I'm not supposed to get that.
I take, we can go for
Hold on.
Wool, I don't know.
Come on. I'll take care of it.
No, it's about 5 years old.
Potted out.
Her name is Kay. Her name is Kay.
Everything on trouble without it.
What is that for?
Well, that's a vegetable.
All the guilt
It's
and
got
everything
spinach,
on our side, and left the other side
and, tomato sauce,
as was.
and cheese.
That didn't belong to the dressing.
That's it. Salt.
Yeah.
Indeed?
Yeah.
There's salt, pepper right there.
I'm surprised
Your salt and pepper a little late, my apologies.
They did, of course, that's what,
If you get off the easiest part.
What about you? Oh, yeah,
I said that to the red.
That's yours.
Yeah, you got old. What did you have?
That kid's watching.
Where?
All try to slug us.
This is real rare.
Multiple systems.
One system.
And it keeps on going and doing that all the time.
Very good.
Yeah. He's pretty well dead around.
What about God? What about it? You still doing all right?
There, next time, we gotta turn it off, flush right out.
She lives.
Yeah.
I'm 7. J.W. is 8.
63.
Real.
Shots in between the two.
Dot Lawrence in between.
So,
Barney, I